Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is another edition of GC Live Talking Tuesday nights, and we're getting to the point of the season now where there's only 2 weeks to go. Last home game, believe it or not. South Carolina gears up to take on Tennessee under the lights. Feels like every game this season has been, at least at home, has been a night game, putting those new lights to work. And there's intern Joe, ready to go. We'll get intern Joe on with us, and we'll get that number up too, in case you guys want to call in. Look, I understand probably there's a lot of people that want to talk about the offense, and we can do that. We can. But I also don't want to waste time on things that aren't going to happen right now. And what I mean by that is, Satterfield's got to go or this or that. It's like certain things aren't going to change this week, okay? You can call in. You can express your opinions in the comments section, whether you're listening on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're listening. That's fine, okay? I've had my opinions about the offense. We could talk about the offense. I just don't want to sit here wasting time about things that aren't going to happen this week. So instead of talking about, all right, hey, why isn't this person fired? It's not going to happen this week, okay? It's not going to happen this week. So I'd rather talk about the game itself. I'd rather talk about where South Carolina is in terms of trying to do something over these next 2 weeks. Because let's call a spade. It's not going to be easy. You're playing the number 5 team in the country in Tennessee. Then the week after, you got to go to Clemson, which, oh, by the way, you haven't played in Memorial Stadium since 2018 because COVID. It canceled that rivalry that year in 2020. So the Tigers, they're going to be fired up to play in their home field. It's not going to be an easy 2-week stretch for the Gamecocks. Not by any means. And with that all being said, again, we can talk about the offense. We can talk about what they can do differently. Because I definitely want to hit on some things that former Gamecock offensive lineman Garrett Anderson mentioned earlier this week on Mixing a Water Monday. If you haven't seen that interview, you can go on Gamecock Central and see that interview in its entirety. But I also want to focus on some of the things that South Carolina, at least for right now, what they can do to put themselves at least in some type of position to compete this week against Tennessee. I understand they're 21-point underdogs. I understand that Tennessee is one of the best teams in the country. They're pissed off on top of it because they know they have to come to Williams-Brice and they have to send a message. They have to send a message because they're trying to do everything they can to stay relevant with the college football playoff. They're on the outside looking in. There's only so much that the Vols can control right now. And one of the things that they're going to be able to control is this weekend against South Carolina. So they're going to have to go out there and they're going to have to kick South Carolina's ass. So I say all that because maybe Tennessee tries to do a little too much. I know that sounds crazy, but maybe they try to do a little too much. And if you're able to find a way to, number one, play clean football, which is a given, you're able to continue to find ways to make plays on special teams, which South Carolina's special teams unit, I mean, it's the best thing that they have going for them right now. Probably the best special teams unit in the country. On top of that, I think efficiency is still number one, especially after what we saw last week. Kai Kroger, 2 touchdown passes on the season, 5 for 5 passing. What more can you say? What more can you say about Kai, or 2 touchdowns in his career? So let's get intern Joe on the horn. We got some questions already coming in. Joe, where do you want to start tonight? Where do you want to start? Because again, like I said, we could talk about the offense. And you tell me, cut me off if you feel like I'm a little off on this. We can talk about the offense. I just don't want to sit here talking about things that aren't going to happen this week, okay?
Yeah.
You want to put it in the comment section, that's fine, okay? I'm not going to stop you. We share 90% of what's said in the comment section. We're not going to stop you, from saying what you want to say. And we'll share it unless you're saying something way out there. But I'd rather talk about the game itself. I'd rather talk about what South Carolina has to do to somehow find a way to make this game competitive.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. I think focus on Tennessee. We all know the age-old story of Fire Satterfield. We all know that that's not going to happen until the end of the season necessarily. So, no use in complaining about it right now. To be fair, although like the complaints are all valid, but I mean, I guess talking about Tennessee, like obviously, like they are the big bad Tennessee that we've seen that beat Alabama. Sure they got beaten in Georgia, but like Athens is a tough place to win in, and Georgia just proved that they were the number one team in the Georgia Bulldogs that we had all thought they were. But Mike, I think they match up, scarily well with this defense. Jalen Hyatt obviously is a guy that the previous regime didn't really recruit, and Beamer, it was kind of funny today at his presser, made sure that he cleared the air on that and said he was not here when they recruited Jalen Hyatt and when he committed to Tennessee. So it's obviously a big miss for the Muschamp staff, but they're not here anymore. So that doesn't really matter either. But I think, obviously you can look and point towards Cam Smith and Darius Rush and say, they've got their hands full with this matchup. And speaking of Cam Smith, today in his presser, he noted that he's had Tennessee circled on his calendar for a long time, especially after the game he had in 2020. Where the fan base, really came after him on social media. He said he kept all the receipts, he screenshotted all of it, and he's ready to go. And I mean, personally, if I'm this fan base, I would not want anybody else guarding a guy like Jalen Hyatt other than Darius Rush and Cam Smith, two All-American defensive backs that really are really talented. So that might give you some hope. But I mean, honestly, like they've seen the tape. They are going to try to run the ball down our throats to start off with. And I mean, that's always the main goal in the SEC. You got to run the ball and you got to run it efficiently. So that's going to be their main goal. And then obviously they're going to try to get Hyatt and Hooker going, get that connection going. And, Smith said he's like, I'd rather have a deep ball, come like play him one-on-one in a deep ball than have him catch something short and in space, because God, he's electric in space. And that's one thing this defense has to do is tackle well. They haven't tackled well, Mike. They haven't tackled well in recent weeks, and especially against Florida. It was abysmal tackling down there in the swamp. And Mike, I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. If they want to stop the run, it starts with tackling, and then also too those little short passes in space. You got to tackle well to try to stop it.
Good stuff. Intern Joe. Joe was down there at the press conference today. If you want to give Joe a call and get onto the program, give us a call at 803-567-3796. Once again, that number is 803-567-3796. Now, a couple things that Joe mentioned I do want to get into, and there's a couple things I'm already seeing here on the side. I see Richard saying, will we use a running back at running back Saturday night? I mentioned some things on Saturday before the game. I was driving down to the Cape, had about 2 hours to kill, so I decided to hop on and do a Twitter space. And one thing that I had mentioned, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, because it's what we do on this program. We try to make sense of things. So we will get into why I feel like South Carolina has been using Bell at running back a little bit more. At least one reason why you're not hearing anyone really talking about it in the South Carolina media market. I'll bring that up. I'll discuss that. And we can also get into some of the other things as to why, if Marshawn's not 100% this weekend, right? You hope he's 100%. You're going to need everyone to be the guys that at this point of the season, everyone's going to be banged up, not just South Carolina. Everyone's going to be banged up throughout the country, but you need everyone to be as healthy as possible to play in this game. And again, I'm not trying to write South Carolina off, but goodness, you got to make sure you find a way just to keep this game competitive. I'm sorry, but from what we've seen over the last couple weeks, this game could get ugly. Now, part of me wants to believe being back at home under the lights after what we just saw against Florida, that USC won't lie down, that they'll bounce back. I'm not saying that they're going to win, but they'll compete. It won't look like Missouri. It won't look like Florida, that they'll bounce back. I want to believe that. I want to believe it. Because, again, we know this stretch for USC. We knew this stretch even going into last week against Florida. Even though Florida out of the three, and I know some Gamecock fans are going to disagree with me with this, but of those 3 games, to me, that was your best bet of getting a win down the stretch. And we can talk about Clemson a little bit. I've been trying to hold off on it because we still have and had 3 games to go. But, you want to look ahead to Clemson tonight, you can do that. We can call into the program and talk about that. Here's Eddie. Eddie says, why can't we have a change? If you drive your car and have a flat tire, don't you change the tire? Satterfield is the flat tire. Well, and I've said this before. I think where South Carolina is at right now, and look, if you're one of those people going back to last season saying, okay, Satterfield should have been gone, we're not, anything I say, anything anyone says isn't going to please you. All right. If that's your mentality, I'm not saying you're wrong. If that's your mentality, anything I say, it's not going to persuade you. But if you want to at least hear me out, then hear me out. At this point of the season, you're not going to fire anybody. You're not. Contract's the way the contract is. And as we've been saying, even going back to that Missouri game, that if a change were to happen, most likely it's not going to happen until after the Clemson game. That's typically how these things play out. And when you look at the contract situation for Satterfield, that would make sense. Now, with that being said, and as Richard brought up, and it goes back to your question, Eddie, or comment, whatever you want to call it, because there's a comment in there as well. We had former Gamecock offensive lineman Garrett Anderson on. Garrett worked over at Hammond under Eric Kimry. He's currently at AC Floor. Shout out to the Falcons. Good luck to them this weekend in their playoff matchup. And he brought up some great things, and that's where Richard's getting that, let the maulers maul. Meaning, let the offensive line do what they do best, which is going back to more so the man blocking. Since the majority of this offensive line, other than Zadarius Hutchinson, is the same offensive line that helped Kevin Harris rush for 1,000 yards a couple of years ago when he led the SEC in rushing yards in 2020. But I say all that because one thing that Garrett brought up that I thought was interesting, and this is kind of the stuff that we're talking about. We're talking with, Perry Orth, Michael Skarnecki over the last couple of weeks, and some of the other former players that we've had on, whether it be Mix and Water Monday, whether it be the GC Live postgame show, or these shows right here, GC Live Talking Tuesday nights. If you're not going to move on from your offensive coordinator right now, and you feel like that's a decision that you're going to wait until the end of the year, okay. But at what point do you allow it to get to a point where you realize, you know what, we got to try something. We got to try something new. Intern Joe, I know I didn't ask you this. I don't know if it's possible. We can see, could fail, but if you could try to bring up that interview with Garrett, if possible. And I want to say it was the 10:25 mark, Joe. 10:25 in that interview. I marked it down. Garrett said something that's very interesting to me. I know you see if that we can from the Mix and a Water interview from this past Monday, yesterday. But I bring all that up because, and we'll let Garrett speak for himself. I don't want to really give it away. But one of the other things that Garrett mentioned was at this point of the year, what do you have to lose, right? And as he brought up, and I haven't been able to find any truth to it. And Garrett also said immediately after he said it, he said, he's like, I don't know what the validity is to this, so don't, put it in stone. But he's heard things, whether it be some of the other coaches in the building, they don't want to call the plays on offense. Now, again, put this out there because we don't like to start rumors or anything like that. This was brought up in the interview. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I've had some people on the message board on Gamecock Central ask if that is true. I haven't been able to find any validity to it, but that's not to say it isn't. Intern Joe's giving me the thumbs up. We'll get to that soundbite in a second. But I say that because, all right, let's play along. Let's say that is the case, okay? If that is the case, what are you going to do at this point? Well, one of the things that you could do, and Garrett Anderson brought this up, regardless if coaches in the building want to call the plays or not, give it to someone else, right? Give them the wheel, if you will. Letting the players kind of call the plays. And I say kinda because, as Garrett mentioned before, that's kind of what they do at AC Flora. And what he meant by that is not saying, okay, hey, what do you want to run? I mean, that would be an absolute bleep show. But the point being is, and it's already happened this year, and it happens more times than you think, not just in South Carolina, but across the country. But we heard Marshawn Lloyd going to the sideline, right? Hey, let's run the ball a little bit more, telling Satterfield. And the reason why Garrett brought that up is because as a player, when you're on the field, you see things that on the sideline you're not going to be able to see the same way. And I know that's going to, we're going to go down a rabbit hole now of, why is he up in the press box? He's done both over the last 2 years. A lot of NFL coaches, they like to be on the sideline. Some like to be up top, but you'll notice a lot on the sideline. It's just the comfortability thing. It's a feel thing. Billy O'Brien, I know when he was with the Patriots, he would be on the sideline. I mean, it's just when he was the offensive coordinator working with Brady, it's a feel thing. So I bring all that up because if you feel like, okay, we need to change something up, you're not going to have the time to be able to do a complete, 180 on the playbook because the playbook's the playbook at this point, right? You're too deep into the season. You don't have the time like getting ready for a Duke's Mayo Bowl to install different things the same way, right? Or coming off a bye week. So why not? Why not let some of the players call plays? Why not do something different? If you're not going to make a move at the offensive coordinator position, but this could be for any position, really. But you know in your heart that something needs to change. Something has to be different, right? Going back to what Eddie said, if you drive your car and it has a flat tire, don't you change the tire? At some point, you're going to have to, because if not, if you really want to go deep with this analogy, what happens? You're going to screw up your freaking car, right? You're going to screw up your car badly. And it's going to cost a lot of money to get things fixed. Not a bad analogy there, Eddie. Took it another step deeper for you. But I want to pull up, see if this works. That interview with Garrett, and we'll see if the audio works. And intern Joe, give it a run.
We're having experiences on the field. Same reason that Lloyd told him to run the ball. He's watching that O-line and maul that defensive line. We're going to get 4 yards of play regardless. Run the ball. I would try something different because, and I think back to that promotion. I don't know how you even describe it. The video that Carolina did, where Shane walked the guys all the way to the top of the stands, talking about those guys who work day in and day out. They afford tickets to be in that stadium. Can you imagine all that to go into that stand and watch us run the exact same 14 plays that don't work all season long? I'd be pissed. I would change it up just for those people, just for the people that bleed Garnet and Black, that this is their everything. I would switch it up for them just to show that you are as passionate as they are.
Stream 85 plus live channels with no hidden.
And I think that summed it up. I think it sums it up. I've always been one that says, all right, and I know fans are going to get upset with me and some boosters will get upset with me. But you could say this about any fan base, right? Patriot fan, Red Sox fan, Gamecock fan, Clemson fan, whatever the case, Braves fan. At the end of the day, you have to do what you feel like is in the best interest of the team. No question about it. But listening to Garrett, I mean, shoot, this is the last home game. This is the last home game. There's been things that just have not been clicking. And I tend to agree with Garrett. This is where I go. I'm like, you know what? Yeah. Think about Johnny and Rachel sitting in, row whatever, section 310, wherever the case may be. And that's not to say, hey, Joey, what do you want to call this week? All it's saying is, you know what? Yeah, we owe it to them. We owe it to those people to change things up. To go back to the analogy, if you have a flat tire, if you know something's wrong with the car, you can't just keep riding on it because you're going to damage the car even more. You're going to damage the car even more. I know intern Joe, it looks like we got the press conference too, if we want to cue anything up. Joe, just your thoughts on that. I know there's some other comments here I want to get to, and then we can cue up some sounds today from the press conference,
Yeah.
Shane Beamer. But just your initial thought on what Garrett had to say as someone that obviously goes to the university but covers the team. You understand you get a good pulse of what's going on with the fan base and everything going on right now in Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Garrett, right? Like, if I were sitting, like, the whole point about the fans, and Shane made a really good point of this too. That's who they're playing for, right? The fans. It's all about the fans, and it's, that's what this program has been built around. So obviously, there's going to be some frustration there, to running the same 14 plays that don't work. Like, this offense has been very stagnant and very, one-dimensional these last couple of weeks. And I love everything that Garrett said. It was a perfect quote, and I think he said it, to a T, that, obviously the fan base is going to be as frustrated as they are because it's the same thing week in and week out. And on the whole Satterfield situation, I mean, I think, if a move was going to be made, it was going to be made after Mizzou. And he didn't, because I'm not sure necessarily the motives why. There's probably a lot of them, firing an offensive coordinator midseason, trying to scramble, find somebody else. And like you mentioned too, Garrett had mentioned that, there are a couple people within the building who aren't necessarily comfortable calling plays. So it's definitely a move that probably will happen at the end of the year. But I mean, I think, like I said, I think Garrett said it.
Joe, can you go back on that? Joe, can you go back on that comment? Did you said that you have heard that, or?
Well, no, I haven't necessarily heard, but I mean, all signs are pointing towards that. Satterfield will be moved on from at the end of the year. And necessarily, like, I think it'll be, something where, it's a better landing spot, whether it be, him being fired and like he goes somewhere else. I think it'll be a clean transition.
And Joe, let me say this, because this happens across college football all the time. I can go back to my days as a player, and sometimes, players aren't always tipped off about it. Sometimes they are. And that's not to say, yes, Satterfield has been told, but hear me out. There are a lot of times when you're in a situation like this, that whether it be something that I've covered during my years, not just covering South Carolina, but covering college football, or being a college football player, just being around it as long as they have. And there's times where the head coach will call in said coach and say, look, I'm not going to fire you, but at the end of the year, we're going to part ways. And I just want you to be aware so you can start looking for a job. People can say about the relationship with Beamer and Satterfield. Does that play a role with it? I'm sure, to an extent, because at the end of the day, Beamer's not stupid. Satterfield's not stupid. All these coaches aren't dumb. I know some fans might disagree with that right now, but
yeah.
But I say that, Joe, because at the end of the day, unless you're winning national championship after national championship, you're going to see turnover on your coaching staff. It's inevitable. Okay. Even if you're winning championship after championship, you're going to see turnover on your coaching staff. And not every hire is going to be the best fit. Not every hire is going to be a home run. Not every hire, and more so, like I said, the fit is going to result in what you're looking for. So I bring all that up because if in fact, South Carolina decides to go in a different direction with their offensive coordinator, out of respect to Satterfield as a friend, number two, but more importantly, just as a coach in the profession, these things happen. These things happen at a lot of places. Now, I'm sure there's people listening saying, well, in this school, in this case, yeah, those things do happen. Those things do happen. But there's multiple layers to it, right? You got to factor in recruiting. How does that impact recruiting? Okay. There's going to be some people that will say, well, do you think recruits want to play? look, I've had conversations with Dante Reno about some of this stuff. I've had conversations with some of these, other recruits, or, other players in the past going through. They know what's going on in that building a hell of a lot more than I do, and a hell of a lot more than a lot of us on the outside do. Okay. And that's not saying like no, but I'm just telling you, they know. And I think Beamer kind of hit on it today a little bit as to, what's going on in the building. It's like they understand things. They're seeing things a little bit differently. And that's not to say like they don't see what the heck's going on from a result standpoint, from an offensive product. Yeah, they know what's going on. But from a recruiting standpoint, and I'm sure there's some that look at it and think like, okay, I'm not that naive. But there's so many layers that go into it as to why you won't do it right now. I think the other thing too is, the other part of it is, what you're hoping for obviously is, okay, give it a chance. Because like I said before, I don't think Satterfield, I think some of the things that he's done, it's not bad. It's just not working here. And I think Beamer likes the football mind that Satterfield has and he brings to the table. And I think he's tried to give him every opportunity he can. But as we've seen with the offense, there's no sugarcoating it. It's just not working. So again, at this point of the season, if you're not going to move on until the end of the regular season, which again, I'm not saying that is the case. I'm not saying this is what I've been told. I'm not saying that this is what you can expect the next couple of weeks, which you could. But if that's how it plays out, it's not going to happen until the end of the regular season. So that's why all the things that we've kind of hit on already, which is, okay, if that's how it's going to be, played out, okay, I understand that. That happens at other schools too. We talk about all the firings. That happens at other schools too, where they hang on to a guy until the end of the regular season. If that's going to be what you're just going to decide to do, going back to what Garrett said, what do you have to lose? You're going up against a Tennessee team who are 21-point favorites to beat you, okay? Then you have Clemson the next week, who I understand offensively, this might not be one of their better seasons, but they still have one of the best fronts in the country. They still do. You look at the draft coming up, I think they got 3 guys who are projected to be something like, from a defensive tackle standpoint, defensive end, to go like, I think it's like 15 defensive linemen. And they have 3 guys in that. So I bring that up just because it's not going to be easy these next 2 weeks. So what do you have to freaking lose?
Yeah, Mike, they're playing with house money, right? Especially against Tennessee. And we said it too, like, it's crazy to think that Clemson is the more winnable game here. We said that on Saturday. Like, it is very crazy to think that. But, I mean, that's just the case. And Clemson's front seven is no joke, like you just said. And I think that especially, like, with everything that's been going on with the whole Satterfield situation, I think as a recruit, there's 2 different ways you can think about it, right? If they move on from a midseason, it shows that they don't necessarily have trust in their guys, and you can spin it a bunch of different ways. But I know a guy like Mazio Bennett is sitting there wondering, like, if they will move on or, what direction they do end up going. And I did see a comment that mentioned about Ray, talked about Coach Tanner and how he feels. And I've been told that he was not very pleased after Florida. And so I would think the direction that they would go in, like I think, back the money truck up was the one thing that I did see. So, you would think that they would try to go after a bigger offensive coordinator and just try to work with Shane to get somebody that he would really want and really would bring a little bit more dimension to this offense. And I think if they do make a splash in terms of as much as splash you can make for getting an offensive coordinator, I think it will say something about recruiting. And I mean, personally, from my standpoint, I think waiting till the end of the year proves that they do trust the guy and, like, they are going to, ride it out. And it's more of a trust factor. And that is more of the energy I'm getting from the Beamer regime.
Yeah. And I also think too, it's one of those things that, because it's a business, right? And this is Shane Beamer's first head coaching job. So we can sit here, we can dissect and break down every single thing that he does. And even though he's the son of a legendary college football coach and has learned from some tremendous coaches along the way, there's going to be things that he's going to have to learn, or at least things that he's been told that he's going to have to go through for the first time as a head coach at some point. So, you know, you're developing a reputation, your own reputation as a head coach. He already had a reputation as an assistant coach, which was very good, which led to him obviously becoming the head coach at South Carolina. How he handles situations like this, you don't think other coaches out there pay attention to it, right? You know, for all the crap that Frank Martin got about being, short leashed with his players, okay? You don't think other coaches see how Shane Beamer handles things, right? If he's short leashed with these coaches, they only last year. Nope, it's like, yes, it's a business, but they're paying attention to that too. So for everything that you want to say, and I used Frank, I love Frank. Everyone knows how I feel about Frank as a person and wishing him the best up here in Massachusetts at UMass. But I use that example because there's so many people that, if you like to use that comparison for things, use it for this. Use it for this. That's why I brought that up. But I think what we'll see, though, with Shane is he and a lot of these coaches, they always have their board of A, B, C, D. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I see Jeff says it's true that Beamer had trouble hiring assistant coaches. There's nothing that I've been told that makes me believe that. Now, if you want to rewind the clock, and I don't know if this is exactly what you mean, Jeff, but we'll rewind the clock because I think some people forget, just like some people forget that Beamer wasn't here when Jalen Hyatt committed to Tennessee. That was the Muschamp era. But let's rewind the clock. I'm not saying that this is what you're meaning, Jeff, but just to remind some people that when Beamer, because actually I think is today the anniversary of Will Muschamp being fired? Maybe the anniversary of that. I think that was 2 years ago today. I should know that. I broke the story and I can't even friggin' remember. So I bring that up, though, because, 2 years ago, Muschamp gets fired. Okay. Shane Beamer's hired a month later. He walks into a situation where he's a first-year head coach. Okay. That aside, he has his offensive coordinator in Mike Bobo. He has an offensive line coach who Mike Bobo picked. Mike Bobo said, I want that guy. And the reason being is your offensive coordinator and your offensive line coach, those two guys need to be in sync. They have to. They have to. They have to. That's not even a question. They have to. What happens? Well, Bobo decides, get some more money at Auburn. And I know there's some people out there saying, well, Beamer should have thrown more money at him. If a guy doesn't want to be here, okay, then just freaking let him go. Especially when the position's not, it's not like he was going as a quarterback coach to an OC. He was staying in the conference, going from OC to OC. Was the money going to be up a little bit more? Yeah. But if that's what you want to do, that shows me, if I'm Beamer, that shows me you don't really want to be here. You don't really want to be here. And then he went to Auburn. Talk about an absolute dumpster fire it's been over there. Bobo didn't even last more than a year. Will Friend was here for a cup of coffee. I don't even know if they put a name tag on the freaking door. That's how short his stint was in South Carolina. But you had those two, and even though you come in when you're going through the interview process, I've talked to multiple coaches, whether it be head coaches, especially on all levels. When you're going through this process and you're sitting down with, in this case, Ray Tanner or Chance Miller, you show them what you're thinking about from a hiring process. You show them your ABC, sometimes even D. You have an idea of what you're looking at and who you're looking at to hire as assistant coaches. So the fact that Bobo and Will Friend essentially left Beamer at the altar Beamer had he had so much going on. He had to find a way to make this work. And that's not to say Satterfield wasn't someone that he was thinking about, but let's be honest with ourselves. They went out and they tried to get Bobo first. They had Bobo. So I bring that up because, there's certain things when you look at this coaching staff, and it's going to be a roller coaster at times, right? And we can evaluate positional coaches, coordinators. I know we're kind of doing that right now with the OC, but I bring this up because there's been things where we've seen from this coaching staff, right? Torian Gray, holy cow, what a job he's done, right? Clayton White, all right, it's been taking some grief the last couple of weeks. A year ago, you would have thought people were ready to make a freaking statue of him. Justin Stepp, all right? Hardesty, running back coach. I mean, he's helped. He's helped with get Marshawn back and going. Look at the job he did last year with those guys. Okay? Because even though you have the talent there, you have to get it out of them. That's your job as a coach. You have to get it out of them. So, and I bring that up. Okay? I mean, we can go down the list. Jody Wright, I feel like he's done a great job with the tight ends. We can go position to position. And I'm not trying to leave anyone. But the point being is I'm bringing up some coaches. I mean, obviously, but we can go down the list. He's brought in some talented coaches, okay? So I don't think that's an issue. And I know I really went down a little bit longer about that. Joe, I know you want to get to something. I want to just hit on couple things real quick here. Yeah. Greg says, dumb question, is it mid-season? Yeah, a little past that. A little past mid-season, Greg. Mike, Travis says, Mike, Garrett Anderson was the best mix in a water guess. No question. No question at all. I'd love to. And I said this to Garrett. I'd love to get him more involved with Gamecock Central. I don't know if I've said that to Shu. So if Shu's listening, hey, Shu, we got to talk about this Garrett guy. And then Eddie says, and we can get into this a little bit more if you have a thought on it, Joe, just trying to get through some of these questions so I don't fall behind. Can't we try another quarterback other than Rattler or Doty? Look, I understand what Joyner's doing out there at quarterback, and I'm not trying to say the guy's not capable of going out there and doing well. I've said this before. I feel like he's not being used enough. I've talked about it before as well about the receiving core and just how deep that room is. Because when you really go down the list, I mean, there's a lot of talented receivers there. Then you look at what they have at the tight end position. And then, especially if you have a healthy Marshawn Lloyd, you can only put 5 players on the field other than the quarterback and then the offensive line. So when you're looking at, okay, we want Juice on the field. There's no question about that. Jaheim Bell on the field. Marshawn Lloyd on the field. You hear people say they want Josh Vann on there too. I mean, you can only put so many players out there. But I do believe, and I do agree with the people that have been talking about, that you got to find ways to get Joyner on there a little bit more, whether that be packages a little bit more, because he's dynamic. But as far as quarterback goes, look, and I know people are going to say, kind of like we're talking about the offense, Joe, what do you got to lose? I do agree. Maybe that's why you roll the dice a little bit more this week, but you stick with Rattler. It's not if we're sitting here talking about the scheme, if we're talking about the offensive coordinator, the way that and I don't know if you're in the same camp, Eddie, so I won't group you into it. But if we're talking about the offensive coordinator and the system is leading to people failing, essentially, you can't pin that all back on the quarterback to a point. Let's try because what's going to happen? You put a new quarterback in. If you're saying it's the scheme, if you're saying it's the system, if you're saying it's the offensive coordinator, what's going to make you believe it's going to be any different? That's all I mean by that. So, understand if you want to say, okay, the quarterback's the problem, you can't sit here and say the offensive coordinator is the issue. Sometimes it's both. But in this case, I don't think that's the thing. I'm not saying Spencer Rattler is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm not saying that. But I also feel like, okay, pick your side with it. Joe, I know you have a couple of things you wanted to say.
Absolutely. To the point about the quarterback situation, I think Spencer's the guy just because mentally, like he's been great for us, and he's been improving week in and week out. I kind of touched on it Saturday. Scar was kind of touching on it Saturday too. Spencer, week in and week out, has been improving. Beamer said like week 2 that like he picks one or two things and improves on it. In the beginning of the year, the fan base was complaining, and like rightfully so, that he was making dumb decisions when he was outside the pocket, because he was. And he was throwing interceptions kind of with his feet, not really knowing what to do with the ball. And he's gotten a lot better at that. Yeah, he's going to make mistakes, as does anybody. But he's gotten so much better at that. And he's also gotten a lot better at tucking it and running. I've seen Spencer lower his shoulder way more times in these last 3 or 4 weeks than I have, even in his career at Oklahoma. I never saw him do that. And, I feel like he's getting into that. And he just keeps improving week in and week out. Florida, obviously, like that's a blowout loss. You can find problems with anybody in any position on the field, and it's pretty easy to do so. But I don't necessarily think it was on Spencer. I think, Vanderbilt really showed what kind of quarterback he was. He had one of the highest QBRs in the country. Can't remember exactly what it was. But also, Travis, to your question, in terms of trusting, like obviously, like we know that, this game is a relationship game as much as it is an X's and O's thing in a business. But at the end of the day, it is a business. But, I think he's holding like it is a trust thing, because he's putting trust in his coordinators, and he's setting the example for other coaches that come in here and say, like, if you are going to get hired, like we have faith in you. And now necessarily, personally, I think, he should have made a move after Missouri. But I think it's what is going on here is, a relationship thing. I think it's, there is faith, I guess, towards the end of the year. And, I think the decision, Mike, you brought it up. I think the decision's already made. The conversation that they had.
It happens, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
That happens in college football, and you try to do coaches a solid by, it's going to happen. But again, and I don't know if we'd ever find out really if this is the case.
Yeah,
you might be able to find out after the fact. You get leaks from inside the building later on if this were to happen, which is to someone else start calling plays. But I feel like that's kind of where we are, because again, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? I do want to bring this up because Craig, I can't.
Real quick, Mike, I didn't mean Satterfield is staying around because he and
yeah.
I wanted to clear that up real quick, because I saw your face when I said that. Like, no, absolutely.
Oh, not. No. This is what I was making a face for. I can't tell if Craig's just trolling or not. I don't know if Craig's just trolling or not. And I love you, Craig, because I know you're loyal and you come on these shows. But Lloyd may not play again for Carolina if he doesn't go this week. Stop that, please. Again, I don't even know if you're just trying to be funny. Stop that. And that's something that we're going to have to get used to. I'm starting to get used to it myself, where we went through it a little bit last year, where as soon as anyone thinks something's bad's happening, right? Whether it be the team, whether it be the play calling, this person's going to go to the portal. This person's going to go to the portal. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have to appease to your players. It's a much different world. And not just football coaches, but pretty much every coach will tell you that you have to find ways that once they're on campus, that you got to make sure they stay on campus, that they don't decommit from your school. Now, with that being said, first and foremost, you got to find ways to win games. You're going to do what's in the best interest of the team. And I know it's real easy for us to sit here and say, of course, South Carolina has dropped the ball in some regard to that. Of course. I mean, that happens across the country. Not every team's going to go, 12-0 in the regular season. But I bring that up because Lloyd, no. That's not to say the guys aren't going to transfer at the end of the year. I don't think it's going to be this huge thing where some people are, everyone's going to know. Okay. We heard this song and dance last year. Even when they were winning. Now, I know it's easy to say, well, they're not as good in this regard or that regard to last year. They don't have the same momentum. Well, we have to wait until the year ends. Was there a possibility they end the regular season 6-6? They go to a bowl game and lose? Yeah, of course there is. Okay, that's football. But I think it's really premature to sit here and be like, all right, everyone's going to stop that. And I do think the reason why I want to bring up the part that we have to let things play out Perfect example. Perfect example. Joe, remember a guy by the name of DeCarrion Joyner? You know that name, right? Yeah. What did Dak say after the Duke's Mayo Bowl? That he was thinking about entering the portal. He was thinking of actually hanging up football altogether. And what happens? He goes out there and he has a phenomenal performance. Now, I know there's going to be some people, well, they're not using it. That's not the point. You're missing the point of the story. Point being is, yeah, it went through his head. And I'm sure there's some guys right now it's going through their head. But let things play out, okay? And I think the big thing more than anything is that even though you're still practicing, but there's downtime in comparison to, week-to-week schedule. That time period between the end of the regular season and the bowl game, being able to catch your breath, being able not to think on an emotional roller coaster, right? I'm sure all of us, I could tell you I'm guilty of it at times in our life where we have to remind ourselves, hey, slow down, take a breath, okay? Don't make a decision based on emotion. So that extra week or weeks, depending on what bowl game they play in, let it all settle down. Let it all settle down. So, Craig, I'm not picking on you, but I'm glad you kind of brought that up, even though I don't agree with that take. And again, I don't know if you're just joking around, but I want to bring that up because it's something I've been seeing more of on Gamecock Central. It's something more I've seen on social media. I don't get to hear from people as much when I'm out and about because, well, I'm up in Boston this fall. So it's a little bit different than going down to, I don't know, Backstreet Grill or somewhere on Main Street or, Village Idiot and someone asking me about this or that. But I'm sure there's conversations like that, Joe, that people feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike.
Also want to bring
100%.
this. Ryan brings this up. What's up, Uve? I understand Beamer's point and things, but to say you're not going to try different play calls and switch things up is incompetent. Nothing to lose. You're ranked 92nd out of 131 FBS schools. Literally nothing to lose. I think if there was a theme, and maybe that's going to be the title for Quick Slants on Thursday, nothing to lose. You really have nothing to lose. I look again, if you just joined the program, one of the things I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to put a comment in, fire this guy, have at it, okay? I'm not going to stop you from doing something. But we're not going to sit here talking all night about things that aren't going to happen this week. They're just not. If you want to do that, you're better off just going in a closet, shut the light off, just sit there and just talk to yourself, okay? Because nothing's going to change right now. So instead, one of the things that we've been focusing on tonight is what South Carolina can do differently. And one thing that we have mentioned multiple times, is that they can change it up. Garrett Anderson, former Gamecock offensive lineman, we heard from him a little bit earlier, mentioning the video of Beamer bringing up the players into the upper deck and saying that you're playing for the people that pay their hard-earned money to sit here, or the groundskeepers that walking by them, the great video that Justin King shot. And Garrett said, why not let players call the plays a little bit more? That's not saying the players are calling every play. Let's not get that misconstrued, okay? Let's not get, but they're on the field. That's something that I've heard at other schools. He mentioned AC Flora, because that's the school he's at, that they do that. But it's not as uncommon as you think. I mean, obviously the one that, you think of the most is Peyton Manning, but that goes without saying. I mean, Peyton had the platinum card, the platinum Costco card. I don't even know if that's a thing. I'm not a Costco member. So, I bring that up because I do feel like if you're not going to go in a different direction right now, okay, I understand. What do you got to lose? What do you got to lose? I do want to try to get to some of these comments because I know we're kind of falling behind on some of the comments. But before we do that, and I know Joe's going to probably pull up some sound, might go a little bit longer tonight. I don't know if intern Joe's got to do statistics or whatever college class that he's in. Joe, let me tell you something, buddy. C's get degrees, all right? You'll be all right. That's what my old coaches told me. Unless you're trying to be like a doctor or a lawyer, you might want to actually do well on those tests and exams. Don't want you screwing that stuff up, Joe. But with that all being said, you can screw things up if you want to be a C's Get Degrees guy. You can give our friends at Liberty Tax a call. I'm sure they didn't get C's. Can help you overcome tax anxiety. Give them a call at 803-462-5576. Tax season is right around the corner, and they will be able to help you out. And speaking about helping out, Clint Hammond, one of the best at what he does at the Mortgage Network. Buying a home right now, it is absolutely crazy. I don't need to tell you that because I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are trying to buy homes or know someone that's been trying to buy a home. It is an absolute zoo. Clint can help you out. He did so with GC Live's own Perry Orth, former Gamecock quarterback. Give Clint a call at the Mortgage Network, 803-576-4450. Intern Joe is ready to go with some things that he wants to pull up. I do want to go back to some of these comments first. Good friend Craig. The use of Stogner, Wells, and the rest of the playmakers is sad. I feel bad for them. I can't disagree with you there, Craig. And I don't disagree with you. I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it. I don't care if people want to roll their eyes, because I'm sure there's going to be some out there. I'm sure there's going to be some of you that listen and say, you know what? Yeah, I agree with you too. Which is, from a talent standpoint on offense, it's not the issue. That's not to say that this offense has the same talent as a Tennessee or whoever, okay? I'm not saying that they're ready to compete for an SEC East title. But they have the talent to do better than what we're seeing, to do better than, to go back to what Ryan Clark was saying, to be ranked 92nd in offense out of 131 schools. Craig, I mean, if he goes pro, Mike, I gotcha, Craig. Sorry to go down a rabbit hole there. I gotcha. I'm just catching up on some of these messages, Craig, but I'm kind of glad you brought that up. And that's the way I interpreted that, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are worried that certain players are going to transfer. I don't think Marshawn's going to go pro. I haven't looked at his draft stock yet. I'm sure it's gone up compared to where it was at the beginning of the season. I have no idea where he was at the beginning of the season. I don't think he was really anywhere. Hate to say that, but I think the reality was just the fact that he's come back from an injury and he had to prove himself. I think he'd be crazy not to come back. Not the same body type, but you look at Kevin Harris a couple of years ago, right? You try to time it out right. It's not that Marshawn is having a 1,000-yard season, but I bring that up because Kevin came back, but the difference with Kevin was, he had the back injury. So that definitely played a role with Kevin. Hasn't he been there 3 years in his eligibility for the pros, if I'm not wrong? This is his third year. That's correct. That is correct. The year that he redshirted was also the year of the COVID season. So want to call it a redshirt year, want to call it a medical redshirt year, want to call it a COVID year. At the end of the day, that's a wash. They're the same thing, essentially, right? He plays last year. So he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. He has 2 years of eligibility left. Jeff says, how much is the NIL helping in recruiting? Will it also keep players from transferring out? Doesn't hurt. I think the difficult part of it is, and we have it on 3. If you want to go check it out, On 3 does a great job with the vault of being able to show you just ballpark based on social media followers, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, as well as what they're doing on the field and the way they're performing and how that's impacting what their essentially what their NIL, what they're worth. But we don't necessarily know, making this up, Spencer Rattler. We don't know how much he's making in NIL, but it can't hurt. And I'll say this, did a story tonight. And so, again, as you guys know, most of you guys know, I'm up in Boston, covering the Gamecocks remotely this season with this great opportunity at CBS Boston that popped up right before the start of the season, and did a story in Boston College. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because NIL in this market, it's not the same compared to a market like South Carolina. Reason being is it's a pro market, right? You got pro teams up here. You want to endorse Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee, 9 times out of 10, you're going to go with a professional athlete. So I bring that up because, when you ask, how much is the NIL helping in recruiting? Can it keep players from transferring out? Sure. But I say that because South Carolina has a very unique opportunity to really get people linked up with some of those NIL deals, because South Carolina, that's your pro team. Those are your pro teams. So I think it can't hurt. And Craig, I just saw that. Yep. God, he saw my response. Never meant he was transferring. I just meant, yeah. What I do, Craig, is this program that we use, StreamYard. And again, we appreciate everyone watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I have the ability to go through all the comments, and I'll star some, and that will go into a separate column. And I starred that comment, so I wasn't able to see the other messages that you were sending in live time. But I thought it was a good point that you brought up, though, I think it led to a good point that I think other people have been talking about, at least with transfers. And I'm not, as we clarified with what you were saying. Intern Joe's giving me a thumbs up. Intern Joe, I know you've been patient, buddy. What you want to say?
Oh, nothing. I mean, I got a clip ready for senior day. And one thing I wanted to get to that too, because, this weekend is senior day, and these seniors have really been a testament to, I guess, the culture that's building so far. So I did want to bring up a clip from the presser where Beamer, just kind of talks about that and kind of mentions, what it means to him to have these seniors stick around and stuff. So yeah, that was the thumbs up. I got a cue ready to go.
Let's do it.
Week. You talked about Josh. We got a lot of guys going to be playing their last home game at Williams-Brice this Saturday night. Just how special is that group to you, as the guys who invested in you when you came in, and so many of them who even came back for that additional year to help you build this foundation?
No, they're so special, and just think so highly of them. They're great people first and foremost, and last year's group was special. Jalen Foster and those guys, Aaron Sterling and Nick Muse, and on and on and on. And they had 1 year with me and gave me everything they had, gave us everything they had, and were able to go into a bowl game. But this group's even more special because a lot of these guys did not have to come back. They stayed for a season, but then they believed enough in what we were doing here as a program that they chose to stay for another year. And I'm just so happy for them. I'm sure they didn't want to be necessarily 6-4. They expected to be 10-0 at this point. Well, we're not, but the fact that they're getting to accomplish, there's still a lot of things out there for them to accomplish. The fact that they believed in me and what we're doing as a program enough to stay around for another year, it says so much about them. And then not just that, but the guys like Zach, who came back and have done nothing but just skyrocket his draft status, with the way that he's played last year. So that's what I love, is the guys that come back, and they come back and it's not like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I mean, those guys have been, not to take somebody else's analogy or expression, but they've been all in everything that we're doing here this season here at Carolina, and thinking about whatever they got to do to make us be the very best they can be. They've helped themselves as future football players beyond South Carolina. And I can remember Javon Gwynn and Eric Douglas when they told me in Wanham that they were coming back, and all three of them sat in my office and told me that they felt like they had so much more to accomplish, and they weren't satisfied with just winning 7 games and going to a bowl game. That they wanted to be better leaders. They wanted to be make more of an impact on this program and do even more with this program. And they've done all that, and more, and then still have things out there for them to hopefully accomplish here down the stretch also.
All right. There we go, Joe.
Jalen Hyatt's had his
and I brought something up, and I accidentally sent it on the over the group chat instead of sending it private. And the reason I said, did you see the last comment by Jason? I just wanted to make sure we pulled that up. So that's the reason why that went out there. So apologies to Jason and everyone out there.
Happens, Mike. Now
Yeah,
kids.
it's not a personal try. I just want to make sure you saw it because I want to bring it up.
Absolutely.
Jason says, disappointing hearing Beamer say they're not going to, reinvent the wheel on offense. They need to at DK. Is this kind of just? Was this something that was asked today at the press conference?
So no, he did mention it because the reporter was kind of like alluding to making a change, whether that be offensive schemes or something like that. I can pull that clip up too. He just kind of talks about not having to reinvent the wheel. What he meant, it's a week to week thing, and they kind of just learn from what the failings of the previous week and stuff. But he's also like, we have our offense and it's worked before. Obviously, like overall, it's not the greatest thing in the world, which is why we're talking about the whole Satterfield thing. But I think offensively, like, you can't really get what he's saying is you can't really get away from like the base. Like Mike, like you were saying, you can't put in a new playbook. You just can't. And like it's going to be impossible to put in so many new plays, and like the guys are going to be even more confused than they are now.
I'm going to do an awful analogy because I'm sure there's people out there that do a hell. I mean, especially down in the South. I mean, we know how people cook and barbecue, all that kind of stuff. And I miss it a little bit down up here. And I'm not even talking about Bojangles. I'm just talking about them good eatings down in the South. But I say all that because, yeah, I mean, it's like buying ingredients to make a cake, right? You're not going to be able to go out there and make a steak with those ingredients. Now you can change things up and make the cake taste different. Like if you go out there and you have X amount of ingredients, and you just keep going back to those are the only ingredients, right? Eggs, flour, whatever the heck it may be, right? You're not going to be able to make a steak out of it at that point. But you can make tweaks to it. You can adjust it. You can make it taste differently. And that's where South Carolina is right now. They don't have a choice, okay? They don't have they're not going to be able to reinvent the wheel at this point of the season. They're just not. But Jeff says, that'd be incredible. It would be kind of funny if they came out running a triple option on the first possession, talking about changing up. That'd be incredible. I'll tell you what, they did that against Tennessee. And they did that against Tennessee, and they won because by doing the triple option. I just build a statue for Satterfield, if that were the case, or Beamer.
Wow. It was not. I think it was Colin's question where he did say he was reinventing the wheel. I was thinking of something entirely different.
Well, yeah. I mean, look. I think at the end of the day, like we said, you're not going to be able to do a complete haul in the offense. You're just not going to at this point of the year. Okay. But and it's something that we've talked about all night long, and I'll be a broken record. Is what do you have to lose with changing some things up? And Jason, again, they said that DK is a package, go with the package, win the bowl game with it. They probably do. They probably do have a package. Now, with that being said, what that package is, we have no freaking clue. And this is something that I talked about last week, and I was hoping South Carolina was going to be able to have some type of success on offense so that hoping that Lloyd would be back and 100% and be able to be the Lloyd that we know him to be this weekend against Tennessee, that they were going to have to spend more time preparing for other things. Now, because of what you did a year ago in the Duke's Mayo Bowl with Dak, teams have had to prepare for Joyner, okay? Because Joyner did what he did against Missouri, teams are having to spend even more time. Didn't seem like that made a difference last week against Florida. But the point still stands. These teams are going to have to spend more time preparing for extra wrinkles that you throw out there. So what that package looks like with Dak out there, I don't know. I think we've seen some of it already. And I'm not saying they're going to save it for the bowl game. I hope not. Hope it comes out this week. And Tennessee's going to be ready. I mean, let's call it for what it is. Tennessee's going to be ready for every trick play in the book because again, the reality is this. Tennessee's just better than you. I mean, there's a reason why they're 21-point favorites. Okay? There's a reason why they're 21-point favorites. I think if I said that a couple weeks ago, a lot of people would get upset by that. But I think a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, you know what, Mike? Yeah, you're right. I'm not saying anything like, out of left field here. But I do feel like, and I do want to bring this up because someone mentioned at the beginning, Joe, but we'll wrap things up in a little bit. I know we're going over the hour mark. Danny said this: sustained drives, eat the clock, hold their offense under 200. I don't know if holding their offense under 200 is going to happen, but I will say this. This is where Tennessee, this is how you can beat Tennessee, okay? This is how you can beat Tennessee. Tennessee is ranked, I believe, I'm trying to pull it up here. I thought I had the right tab. I don't. But I know that they're ranked from a pass defense. They're one of the 10th worst in the country. They were 6th worst, 5th worst going into last week's game. I think they're still in the top 10, though. I bring that up because it's like a mousetrap. What they do is they want to play tempo on offense, okay? They want to be able to go out there. They want to run about 80 plays on offense. They want to gas your defense. On the flip side of it, from a defensive standpoint, even though they have struggled to stop the pass, they don't hate it when you pass on them. And here's why. In a lot of these games, yes, they're giving up big chunk yardage, okay? But as the game goes on, which you'll notice in some of these games, I say some, obviously Alabama, yeah. But in some of these games, Georgia, yeah. But they want you to keep throwing it because if they get a couple stops, guess what's going to happen? 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. They get the ball right back quickly. And for South Carolina, we saw it against Missouri. We saw it against Florida. Although the Gamecocks played better defensively as the game went on in the second half, obviously played like crap overall. If you want to put it, if you look at a pie chart, the majority of it was crap. It was crapola. You allow over almost 400 yards, almost like 370-something yards. As bad as that was by the defense, I can't help but put some of that blame on the offense. And the reason being, Joe, is they couldn't stay on the field. They couldn't stay in the field. So if you're not allowing your defense, who has flaws, we've seen it over the last couple of weeks, we've seen it throughout the course of the season. If they have flaws and you're not helping them stay off the field to be able to catch their breath because you, as an offense, can't stay on the field, this is a recipe for disaster this weekend against Tennessee because Tennessee, this is exactly what they want to do. So, look, I know you want to throw the football on Tennessee because that's what they've proven is their weakness, okay? But, again, be wary of that. Be cognitive of it because it will be like the bait that we've talked about and how other teams who, yes, they've had success passing the football, at times they've took the bait as the game has gone on, Joe. And what happens? 3 and out, 3 and out, 3, and then your defense is absolutely gassed. So, look, throw the football on Tennessee. I'm not telling you not to. Throw the football on them. That's probably going to be your best bet to beat them. But realize this, and this goes back to something that I know a lot of people have been saying the last couple of weeks, Joe, all season really, even go back to last year. You have to have a feel for the game. You have to have a feel for the play calling on offense. You have to have a sense of what is going on offensively to know that if you are trying to pass and things aren't working from a passing standpoint, that you got to find ways. Even if you throw the ball, you can get creative. You can get creative by screen pass, whatever. Just find ways where the clock's running. So it's not 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and your defense got to go back out. It has to go back out there.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, literally, like this defense needs rest as young as it is. They need time to kind of recruit or rest, really, like get some time off the field, be able to look at the last drive. And this offense has been unable to do that when, they stall out the 3 and outs, kill this defense. Like it goes both ways. You got to think about it two ways. And they got to start. I mean, obviously in the SEC, you got to start every game off by running the football. That's what opens up the passing lanes. I mean, that's what Georgia did, right? Stetson Bennett, his first touchdown against Tennessee was a rushing touchdown. Like they started to run the ball, and that's what opened up the passing lanes, and that's why Tennessee got exposed. So you got to start with running the football, obviously. Another big key this weekend, it's obviously like stopping Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker, the Hyatt connection, it's a really big thing. That's what they have to stop. It's the main focus. But again, it all comes down to stopping the run defensively, like I said earlier. And then like I said, offensively, like we just mentioned, like you should throw the ball all over the place, but the passing game doesn't open up unless you run the ball well. And I don't necessarily know if that happens as much with Marshawn or CBS. And Beamer said today, the injury report update, I guess all the guys that had the flu are good to go. Everybody who got injured against Florida is good to go. And then Marshawn and CBS are the two guys that I believe are the only two guys that are questionable. And he said, they've been practicing this week. They've been limited, but it's kind of just depending on them if they want to give it a go. If not, he said as of now, they're telling him that they're ready to go and have a game. But I mean, we'll see what happens with that. I think obviously having both of them back would be huge, even if it's just, having them in terms of like a window dressing standpoint, like get them in uniform, get them with pads on, let them warm up because, Tennessee's going to take note of that. And granted, they've been hurt for the last couple of weeks, so I don't know how much they'd take that, probably with a grain of salt. But I mean, it still makes an impact because it says like they might play, and they add a depth to this offense a little bit, and especially a depth to the run game. But it all starts there, Mike. If you want to throw the ball, you got to run the ball, especially in the SEC.
Mm-hmm. No question about it. Craig says, I'm not counting on Lloyd going. I pay money to see him go. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, I think the thing, too, is you have to think about his health and just the reality of the game that you're going into, too. If this was a situation where South Carolina, I'm making this up, if South Carolina was sitting here at what, 8 and where would that put us? 8-2, maybe you push them. In a game like this, what do you have to lose? What do you got to gain by forcing him out there? Obviously, if you can pull off this upset, it would be huge. But at the same time, too, you got to think about it, especially a guy who come back from, a lower body injury from a couple of years ago. I know it's not the same, but the last thing you want to do is put him in a situation where he has a mental hurdle to overcome. And I know the injuries aren't the same. So we'll see. We'll see how he goes. If he's not 100%, he could really get hurt. No, I agree. And honestly, if you have an opportunity to rest him up, if he's not 100%, of course, I hope that he's 100% for Clemson, or as close to 100% as possible. Because, again, Clemson, I'm not going to convince myself. I don't think South Carolina is going to win that game. But from a flaw standpoint, we're talking about flaws. Clemson has more flaws than Tennessee, and I'm not going out on a limb saying that.
I mean, obviously, like you want to beat Clemson more, right? Like that's what it comes out. Like you rather win the rivalry game than beat Tennessee.
Yeah, and I know there's gonna be a lot of people that feel that way. To me, Tennessee's in your division, not just your conference, your division. You're trying to do what you can to leapfrog them, and that's not just. Clemson has been recruiting on a national level the last couple of years. Tennessee is starting to do that a little bit more. Marcus Lattimore mentioned a couple weeks ago on one of our programs that, Tennessee's got a national brand. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Even during the years when they weren't that great, South Carolina's trying to overcome that. South Carolina's had a small window of success. And that's not to say that they can't turn into something special. It just means that they're not there yet. And that's okay. That's okay to admit. not apples to apples by any means, but look at what Don Staley's done with women's basketball here. South Carolina was not a school that was known for success with women's basketball. That changed. Look at baseball. South Carolina wasn't known to have success baseball-wise. They've had some great players along the way, no question about it. But then Ray Tannery got here and things changed. So I bring those things up saying that it's not impossible to change the narrative. It's just they're not there right now. And that's okay. There's no reason to fight it and say, oh, Tennessee. They have some history. They've won a national title. They've had some pretty legendary players come through that program. But that's not to say that South Carolina can't turn it around. I just don't know how long it's going to take. It's going to take time. We're seeing that right now again. Joe, anything that you want to say before we wrap things up?
I think we covered it pretty much. Again, I think they got their hands full with Tennessee. Defensively, you got the matchup on the perimeter. But again, we talked about it Saturday. Linebackers, you need guys to really step up and fill their gaps, and they're so banged up at linebacker. It's going to be tough. But Beamer said it like in his presser. They got to tackle. They got to fit their gaps. But certainly they're going to have their hands full. And I mean, we'll see. I think Cam Smith is going to cause Jalen Hyatt some problems. But I think Tennessee's just too much offensively. But I mean, we'll see. Playing with house money, you never know, Mike.
It's going to be a good matchup. And then with Hooker, I mean, you're going to have to go. It's in a sense, I mean, Hooker has a better arm, but kind of like Richardson, he's a guy that can beat you with his legs. Yeah. So you have to do a hell of a better job much better job of containing. That was something that we talked about ad nauseum, that South Carolina had to do a better job of containing. They had to do a better job on their perimeter of coming off the blocks. As I would like to say, you can't be out there dancing like you're at the high school prom on a Friday night. You get off the freaking blocks on the outside, okay? Be physical, get off the damn block, not just the defensive backs. It can be, an outside linebacker, depending on the situation, depending on the personnel that Tennessee throws at you. Get off the damn blocks and make a tackle. And just as important, if not more this weekend, just because they are explosive, third downs, okay? 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, get off the field. Those money downs, get off the field. You cannot put yourself in situations where drives are 6 plays, 7 plays, and the next thing you know, because you didn't get off the damn field, now they're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 plus drive plays because you don't know what you're going to get out of your offense. That's just the reality of it. Marshawn Lloyd in there or not, the way the defense needs to be thinking is we don't know what's going to happen with our offense. That's the way it always should be, but especially now. We don't know what we're going to get out of them. We don't know if they're going to be able to stay on the field for more than 3 plays before they punt the ball.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be negative, but that's just the reality of it. So as a defense, you have to take it upon yourself to control what you can. And when you're out there and you're in one of those money down situations and it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, you do a great job covering downfield. That's great. Okay. You take Jalen Hyatt out, Cam Smith, Darius, whatever the case may be. You cannot, and Hooker's a very talented player. You cannot let Hooker beat you with his feet. Because if he does that, you're going to be in for a long, long day. You're going to be in for a long, long day. So, again, what this game will come down to, we can talk about the offense because you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But when I talk about the offense, what I'm more concerned about more than anything else is them and their inability as of late to stay on the field, to sustain drives. And if they can't do that, what I'm worried about more than anything, Joe, is just what we're going to see from the defense if they don't have enough rest. Because this defense, yes, they have some talented players out there, but they're banged up. They've been banged up for the majority of the season. But at this point of the year, especially in the secondary, going up against one of the best pass offenses in the country with one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver, I know Marvin Harrison Jr. would like to have a comment on that. But I say that because Jalen Hyatt's the real deal. We've seen it going back to his days at Dutch Fork. I'll never forget, and we'll end it after this, Joe. So I brought this up on one of the Clemson shows I was on earlier. We do a Gamecock segment with Lott and Swan, Clemson Sports Talk. And one thing that I mentioned was it seems like it was just yesterday where Dutch Fork was playing in the state championship game, and the then head coach, Jeremy Pruitt, was at the game. And Jeremy Pruitt was on the sideline, the far sideline where the visitors would be for South Carolina game. And he was maybe on the 30, 40-yard line walking back and forth, but he was in the end zone where the student section was. Okay. Hyatt scored a touchdown on that same sideline in the opposite end zone, going away from the student section. You want to know who was in that end zone? There was another college coach there that day. His name was Will Muschamp. Now, obviously, Muschamp doesn't coach there anymore, but I bring this up because I just remember a look. I don't know if it was intentional. I just remember this look Hyatt had when he walked by Muschamp after that game. And he was on cloud nine.
Yeah.
He was on, but I bring that up because, yes, Shane Beamer, and I'm glad our good friend, I know he's over at the Big Spur, but I always give credit when credit's due. Hale asked the question today. And he also brought up a point about making sure that people know, Beamer, you weren't here when Hyatt didn't get an offer by South Carolina. It's not a Muschamp thing. I'm sure it is to an extent for Hyatt. It's you were the university that I grew up around down the street, and I'm going to take it out on you. So, yeah, you got to be ready. You got to be ready. Joe, any final thoughts? I know I gave you a chance, but I kind of had a couple extra things to say. I don't know if you have any thoughts on anything I said there.
No, I mean, I think you made a good point. Like, this is, even though it's not the, same regime, I think Jalen Hyatt always carries something in the South Carolina game. So, and I think Beamer made a good job, or he did a good job today of, I guess, clearing the air, and made a good point of, making sure to, clear up like how they recruit guys, and, not letting guys go through the state, and brought up Nicky Manwari, DQ Smith, how they've progressed. So, clearly, like, the new regime is doing a little bit better at getting some of those guys in state that wouldn't necessarily be, or that slipped through, if you will. So, absolutely.
Real quickly, Joe, you can get going if you want, bud, because I know held you up. I said I was going to bring this up, and I didn't. I'll be real quick with this thought, okay? Again, we try to make sense of these things around here on GC Live Talking Tuesday nights. I said this before the game the other day, trying to make sense of it, right? Because I don't agree with it fully, but connecting dots from what Beamer has said in past press conferences as to, comments about Bell. We know Bell can play wide receiver. We know Bell can play tight end, okay? But one thing that he mentioned, and I believe it was after the Vanderbilt game it was leading up. It was the week leading up to the Vanderbilt game. And it may have been, trying to remember exactly. He may have talked about it after the Vanderbilt game on that Sunday night teleconference, but he certainly talked about leading up to it. One thing that Bell has done that Beamer likes and this coaching staff likes is that when he plays the running back position, he has done a good job with his blocking. Going back to a comment that Marcus Lattimore told me months ago when I asked him, when you're in a running back room like South Carolina has this year, what can you do to stand out to make sure you stay on the field? And the first thing he said was, if you can block, it's going to be hard for them to take you off the field. Now, there's going to be people that will say, well, that's not utilizing Bell's talents. I understand that. I'm not disagreeing with you. But what I'm trying to tell you is I think that's one of the reasons why they feel like he's able to do a little bit more, maybe from a blocking standpoint, than Rashad Amos or Twitty, or, we know Juju, what he's capable of doing. We know his skill set. Lavassier Carroll, I know he's at the 3-game mark right now. But I bring that up because I think that's one of the reasons why. So, again, you don't have to agree with it, but that's the comment that I was going to share that I don't think anyone else, at least in the South Carolina media market, has discussed. But, and obviously I look at the game differently and played it. When I heard those comments, that's what came to my mind is they like what he's doing from a blocking standpoint, which is not easy to do when you're playing two other positions. Some people might think tight end and receiver are the exact same position. It's not. It's not. Even when he's detached, it's not. So for him to be playing running back and him to do a good job from a blocking standpoint with those angles, those blocking angles aren't the same as blocking at the line as a tight end. Because we've talked about before, maybe Nate Atkins, they like what he's doing there. And they like Bell from a running back standpoint. But just wanted to throw that out there. Joe, appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate everyone that tuned in tonight. If you missed any of our show, no problem. Right? You go onto the YouTube page on Gamecock Central. You can rewatch this entire show. We did a long one tonight. 1 hour, 26 minutes. That's 86 minutes, Joe.
Having fun here.
It's 86 minutes.
Having fun.
And if you got to go to work tomorrow or you're going to be at work and you don't want to listen to your boss or you want to be like Joe, get C's. That's what I do. I'm just kidding, Joe. C's get degrees, baby. But if you want to be able to have fun, you can listen to our show in podcast form. That's also on Gamecock Central. You can also listen to the GC Live daily shows that we do. Chris Clark and Wes Mitchell. So appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. Hope you guys had some fun. And we will do it again.
See you Saturday.
On Saturday, GC Live postgame show.